The wind does not ask permission here. It carves the face, splits the lip, drives ice into the lungs like broken glass. In the northernmost reaches of the world, where the sun abandons the earth for months at a time, where the sea freezes solid enough to bear the weight of a man and his horse, the land does not forgive weakness. It does not forgive hesitation. It does not forgive those who build above ground. This is Scandinavia. 9th century. The age of iron and ice. A farmer stands at the edge of his burned-out hall, smoke still rising from the blackened timbers. The roof collapsed 3 days ago under the weight of snow. His wife's hands are blistered from frostbite. His children sleep pressed against the cattle, sharing what little warmth remains in their bodies. He has rebuilt this structure 4 times in 6 winters. Each time the wind finds a way in. Each time the cold wins. He kneels in the snow, digging with bare hands, fingers blue and cracked. Not in defeat, in understanding. The old woman in the village, the one who remembers the songs from before the raids, before the conversions, before the churches, she told him once that his grandfather did not build upward. He built down, into the belly of the earth itself, where the wind cannot reach, where the cold cannot bite, where the temperature never changes, summer or winter, storm or calm. 60 degrees. Always. The farmer's breath clouds in the frozen air as he digs deeper. Snow gives way to soil. Soil gives way to clay. Clay gives way to stone. His hands bleed. He does not stop. Because above ground, his family will die. Above ground, everything dies. But below, there is a different law. A law written not by kings or gods, but by the earth itself. This is not a story about Vikings as warriors. This is not about raids or swords or conquest. This is about something far more brutal, far more desperate, far more intelligent survival. The kind of survival that required men and women to abandon the sky, to reject the surface world, to live half-buried like roots, like stones, like the dead. But they were not dead. They were warm. The longhouses you see in museums, the reconstructed wooden halls with their high roofs and smoke holes, they are lies. Beautiful lies. Built for kings and chieftains who could afford to waste timber and labor. The real Viking world, the world of farmers and fishermen and herders, was not built tall. It was built low, dug into hillsides, covered in earth, roofed with turf so thick you could walk across it without knowing a family lived beneath your feet. And inside, in the center of that buried hall, a fire burned. Not roaring, not wild, just steady, just enough. And the walls, stone and sod and clay, they held the heat, held it like a secret, released it slowly, evenly, through the long black nights when the world outside dropped to 30 below zero. The children slept without shivering. The livestock survived. The food did not freeze. And the temperature always remained the same. 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Year-round. Without insulation as we know it. Without heating systems. Without technology. Just earth. Just stone. Just knowledge passed down from the ones who learned the hard way that the surface is a trap, and the only true shelter is the one you carve from the ground itself. The farmer keeps digging. His wife joins him. Then his eldest son. They do not speak. They do not need to. They know what their ancestors knew, that the earth does not freeze 6 feet down, that the ground holds memory, thermal memory, that if you build with the land instead of against it, the land will keep you alive. This is the story of how the Vikings survived the unsurvivable. Not with fire, not with fury, but with shovels, stone, and the cold, patient intelligence of a people who understood that the greatest fortress is not the one that reaches highest, but the one that roots deepest. And it begins, as all true survival begins, with digging. The Scandinavian plateau does not care what you believe. It does not care what you pray to. It will kill you with indifference, the way water kills, by simply being cold enough, long enough, patient enough. Winter here is not a season. It is a siege. From November to March, the sun barely rises. When it does, it skims the horizon like a rumor, pale and distant, offering no warmth. The temperatures plummet to 20, 30, 40 degrees below zero. The wind, always the wind, screams across the treeless tundra with nothing to stop it. It finds every crack, every seam, every poorly chinked log. It turns shelters into tombs. A surface dwelling built of wood, no matter how well constructed, becomes a death trap. The timber contracts in the cold. Gaps appear. Wind howls through. The fire inside devours oxygen faster than the smoke hole can expel it. The inhabitants wake choking. Or they do not wake at all. Carbon monoxide is silent. It does not announce itself. It simply takes. And then there is the snow. Not the soft, picturesque snowfall of children's tales. This is snow that falls for days without stopping. Snow that piles 6, 8, 10 feet high. Snow that collapses roofs, buries doorways, suffocates anyone trapped inside. In the villages, they find families in spring, still seated around cold hearths, still clutching each other, frozen in the postures of final warmth. The Vikings learned quickly. Height is suicide. A tall structure catches wind. A peaked roof collects snow. A wooden hall, no matter how grand, is an oven in reverse. Every bit of heat generated inside escapes through the roof, through the walls, through the floorboards into the frozen earth below. You can burn every log within a mile and still wake with frost on your beard, ice in your water, your breath visible even indoors. The wealthy tried. The jarls and the chieftains built their great halls, soaring timber structures with dragon-carved posts and high ceilings. And every winter, they burned through forests. They kept thralls working in shifts, feeding the fires day and night. They slept in furs piled 3 deep. And still they were cold. Still the children died. Still the old and the sick did not survive to see spring. But the farmers, the ones who could not afford endless timber, who had no slaves to tend fires, who lived on the margins where survival was a daily negotiation, they remembered something older. Something their grandfathers' grandfathers had known, back when the Romans were still calling them barbarians, back when the world was newer and harsher and more honest. They remembered. The earth does not freeze below the frost line. 4 feet down. 6 feet down. 10 feet down, depending on the latitude. Below that depth, the ground remains stable. The temperature holds. Not warm, not cold, stable. 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Year-round. Always. This is not magic. This is geothermal reality. The Earth's core radiates heat, slowly, constantly, imperceptibly. That heat diffuses upward through stone and soil. At depth, it balances against the cold descending from the surface, and there, in that equilibrium, is the narrow band where life is possible. The Vikings did not have the language of thermodynamics. They did not speak of thermal mass or geothermal gradients, but they had something better than language. They had desperation, and they had observation. They saw that caves stayed warm, that root cellars never froze, that animals, foxes, bears, rabbits dug dens underground and survived winters that killed men in wooden houses. So they stopped building up, and they started digging down. Not caves, not simple pits, but engineered, semi-subterranean longhouses. Structures half buried into hillsides, roofed with layered turf, walled with stone and sod. Buildings that disappeared into the landscape, that became part of the earth itself. It was not a choice born of preference. It was a choice born of corpses, of frozen children, of collapsed roofs and suffocated families. The land had spoken, in the only language it knows, death. And the Vikings, pragmatic and brutal and unflinchingly practical, listened. They learned to live like roots. And in doing so, they learned to survive the unsurvivable. The first cut is always the hardest. The farmer chooses his site carefully, always a hillside, sloping south or east to catch what little sun the winter offers. Not steep enough to risk landslides, not flat enough to flood. The earth here is layered. Topsoil, clay, glacial gravel, bedrock beneath. He must dig through the first 3 without reaching the 4th. Bedrock cannot be carved. Bedrock means starting over. He begins in summer. This is not work for autumn. The ground must be soft. Even so, it is brutal. Iron tools are precious. Most families have one spade, perhaps two, a pickaxe if they are fortunate. The blade is reforged every season, sharpened on whetstone until the edge gleams. It will dull again within hours. Clay and stone do not yield gently. Every strike sends shock up the arms, into the shoulders, down the spine. Men develop permanent bends in their backs. Women's hands grow calloused as tree bark. The initial excavation is a trench cut horizontally into the hillside, 10 feet wide, 20 feet deep, 30 feet long. The dimensions vary by family size, by livestock, by ambition, but the principle remains. Dig deep enough that the roof will be level with the hillside above so that earth and turf can be piled atop it without creating a structure that rises against the wind. The soil comes out in baskets, leather buckets, sometimes bare hands. It is piled downslope, away from the entrance, away from drainage paths. Children carry loads half their body weight. Pregnant women dig alongside their husbands. There is no leisure class in survival. Everyone digs, or everyone dies. The walls begin to take shape. In regions with good stone, they are lined with stacked rock. No mortar, just careful placement, each stone chosen for fit and weight. In areas without stone, they use what the earth provides: packed clay, reinforced with woven branches, timber posts sunk deep into the floor to bear the weight of the roof above. This is not architecture as art. This is architecture as desperation made permanent. The floor is dug below the entrance level, sometimes by a foot, sometimes by 3. This creates a natural cold sink. Heavier, colder air settles at the lowest point, away from the sleeping platforms, away from the hearth. Warmer air rises and circulates near the ceiling. It is passive climate control, designed not with diagrams but with lived experience, with trial and frozen error. The roof is the masterpiece and the nightmare. First, timber beams are laid across the width of the structure: birch, pine, oak if available, driftwood if not. These beams must bear the weight of the earth that will cover them. They must not sag. They must not rot. The Vikings coat them in pine tar, in animal fat, in anything that repels moisture. Rot is slow death. A collapsed roof in winter is fast death. Across the beams they lay smaller branches, woven tight in a lattice. Then comes the first layer of turf, slabs of earth cut from the hillside, roots and grass still intact. Each slab weighs 30-40 pounds. They are lifted, placed, overlapped like shingles. The roots interlock, binding the layers together. The grass continues to grow, anchoring the structure further. More turf. Then soil. Then stone in some cases, for additional weight and thermal mass. The final roof is 2, 3, sometimes 4 feet thick, heavy enough to stay in place through storms, thick enough to insulate, dense enough to hold heat. And then, the most crucial element, they leave it alone. For weeks, sometimes months, the structure settles. The weight compresses the walls. The turf roots spread. The soil compacts. Gaps close. The building becomes less a structure and more an organism, living, breathing, sealing itself. Only then do they move in. The entrance is low. You do not walk in. You crouch, sometimes crawl. This is intentional. A low door means less cold air enters. It means wind cannot blow directly inside. It means heat stays trapped. Inside, the darkness is absolute until the fire is lit, but it is not the darkness of a grave, it is the darkness of a womb. Enclosed, protected, constant. The temperature, even before the fire is struck, is already stable. 60 degrees. They light the central hearth, and the warmth begins to radiate, not into open air, not lost through cracks and poorly fitted logs, but absorbed into the stone walls, into the earth roof, into the clay floor. The structure itself becomes a battery. It stores the heat, releases it slowly, evenly through the freezing night. And when summer comes, The process reverses. The thick earth roof insulates against the heat. The cool mass of the hillside draws warmth away. The interior remains stable. 60 degrees. The Vikings did not conquer the climate. They negotiated with it. They dug themselves into the one place the climate could not reach. And they survived. The fire is not roaring. It never roars. A roaring fire is waste. It devours wood faster than it produces useful heat. It creates temperature swings, scorching near the flames, freezing in the corners. It fills the air with smoke, chokes the lungs, blackens the roof timbers with creosote that eventually ignites and burns the entire structure from within. The Vikings learned a different kind of fire. Low. Steady. Banked. In the center of the longhouse, a shallow stone hearth is lined with flat rocks chosen for their density. Granite. Basalt. Soapstone if they are lucky. These stones are not decorative. They are thermal batteries. The fire heats them slowly over hours, and they release that heat for hours more, long after the flames have died to embers. The smoke rises, but it does not escape through a hole in the roof. Not directly. Instead, it drifts along the underside of the turf ceiling, carried by convection toward a smoke hood, a crude chimney of stacked stone or clay positioned near the back wall. The smoke exits there, but slowly. Its heat is trapped long enough to warm the roof mass before dissipating into the outside air. This is not accidental design. This is engineering born of necessity. The walls are layered like skin. Innermost is stone or packed earth, dense and cold absorbent. Then a gap, sometimes 6 inches, sometimes a foot, filled with dry moss, heather, even seaweed in coastal regions. This dead airspace is the true insulator. Air, when still, conducts heat poorly. The gap prevents warmth from bleeding into the frozen hillside beyond. The outer wall is turf and soil, thick and heavy, pressed tight against the hillside. It becomes indistinguishable from the slope itself. Grass grows atop it. Moss creeps across it. In spring, wildflowers bloom. From a distance, there is no house. There is only the hill. Inside, the floors are beaten earth, sometimes layered with straw or rushes. These are replaced seasonally, composting beneath the sleeping platforms, generating their own small warmth through microbial decay. Nothing is wasted. Every biological process is harnessed. The sleeping platforms are raised, 2-3 feet off the ground. This keeps bodies above the cold air that settles in the floor trench. The platforms are lined with heather layered with sheepskins, piled with woolen blankets woven so tight they repel wind. Families sleep together, parents and children, and sometimes elderly grandparents sharing heat through the night. At the far end of the longhouse, separated by a low partition, the livestock sleep. Cattle, goats, sheep in some regions. They are not kept outside. Outside, they freeze. Their body heat is too valuable to waste. A single cow generates as much warmth as a small fire. 5 cows can raise the interior temperature by 10 degrees. The animal's breath, moist and warm, adds humidity to the air. This is critical. Dry air feels colder than humid air at the same temperature. The moisture also prevents the wooden structural elements from cracking, prevents human skin from splitting in the relentless dryness of heated indoor air. Ventilation is minimal but deliberate. A small gap near the door allows fresh air to seep in, slowly, near the floor. It is drawn toward the hearth, warmed, and rises. Stale air and smoke drift toward the chimney hood and exit. The cycle is passive, constant, self-regulating. The Vikings understood something modern architecture often forgets. Thermal mass is everything. A wooden house heats quickly and cools quickly. It has no memory. A stone and earth house heats slowly, but once warmed, it holds that heat for days. The walls, the roof, the floor, they absorb energy during the day, during the fire's peak, and release it gradually through the night. The temperature does not spike. It does not crash. It stabilizes. In winter, when the outside air is 30 below zero, the interior remains 55 to 60 degrees. In summer, when the outside air climbs to 70 or 80, the interior remains 55 to 60 degrees. The Earth does not care what season it is. The Earth holds equilibrium. And the Vikings, living inside that equilibrium, thrived. They did not need constant fires. They did not need endless fuel. They needed only enough heat to offset the slow, inevitable bleed of warmth through the insulation. A small fire in the morning, another in the evening. That was enough. The stones remembered, the walls remembered, the earth remembered, and in remembering, they kept the people alive. This is not primitive technology. This is sophisticated empirical engineering. This is a civilization that understood thermodynamics before the word existed. That built passive climate control systems 1,000 years before modern architecture rediscovered the concept and called it innovation. The Vikings did not invent the wheel, but they perfected the hearth. And in doing so, they mastered the one thing that matters most in the frozen north. They mastered heat, not by generating more of it, but by refusing to let it escape. The door closes. The wind stops. That is the first thing you notice. Not the darkness, not the smell of smoke and livestock and human bodies pressed close. The silence, the sudden, absolute absence of wind. For people who have lived their entire lives in the scream of northern gales, the quiet is disorienting. Some say it feels like going deaf. Others say it feels like being born. Inside, the air is thick, not foul, not yet, but heavy with moisture and warmth and the scent of living things. Your eyes adjust slowly. The fire in the center hearth is a bed of coals, glowing dull red, barely flickering. It provides just enough light to see shapes, the central posts, the sleeping platforms, the hanging bundles of dried fish and herbs suspended from the roof beams. This is home, not as a place of comfort, as a place of survival. The day begins before dawn. Not that dawn means much here in winter. The sun will not rise for hours, and when it does, it will be a pale ghost barely clearing the horizon. But the family wakes anyway. Routine is survival. Chaos is death. The woman rises first. She is not the wife. She is the firekeeper, the food preparer, the manager of resources. She adds fuel to the hearth. Small, dry sticks. Never logs. Logs are for building, not burning. The fire catches. Reluctant. Smoky. She blows on it gently. Too much air and it flares and dies. Too little and it smothers. She has been doing this since she was 6 years old. She does not think. She simply knows. The children wake next, curled together on the sleeping platform like a litter of foxes. Their breath is visible even here, even with the fire. They do not complain. Complaint is a luxury. They pull on their woolen tunics, their leather shoes stuffed with dried grass for insulation. They shuffle to the fire and warm their hands. The man tends the animals. He climbs down into the partitioned section where the cattle sleep, their bodies massive and warm, their breath clouding the air. He checks their hooves for rot, their eyes for infection. A sick cow is a dead cow, and a dead cow is a family that freezes. He feeds them dried hay, stored in bundles pressed against the walls. The hay smells sweet. The cattle chew slowly, rhythmically. Their body heat radiates through the partition, warming the human side of the longhouse. Breakfast is simple. Porridge made from barley or oats, cooked in a soapstone pot suspended over the fire. Sometimes there is dried fish, rehydrated in the hot water. Sometimes a bit of butter if the milk has been good. They eat in silence, sitting on low stools around the hearth. There is no table. Tables are for halls, for feasts, for chieftains. Here there is only the fire and the people around it. The day's work begins. In winter, there is little to do outside. The fields are frozen. The sea is ice. The livestock cannot be grazed. So the work happens inside. The woman spins wool on a hand spindle, twisting fibers into thread, thread into yarn, yarn into cloth on a vertical loom propped against the wall. She does this for hours, every day, for months. By spring, she will have woven enough cloth to trade, to make garments, to repair what the winter has worn through. The man carves wooden tools, bone needles, handles for knives. He sits by the fire, his knife flashing in the dim light, shavings falling onto the packed earth floor where they will be swept up and added to the hearth for kindling. His hands move automatically. He has carved 10,000 things in his life. He will carve 10,000 more. The children are not idle. Idleness is death. They twist rope from plant fibers. They sort dried beans. They learn by watching, by doing, by failing and being corrected, the 1,000 small skills that will keep them alive when they have their own longhouses, their own fires, their own silent winters. There is no privacy. Privacy is a concept for the wealthy. Here, everyone sees everything. Birth, death, coupling, sickness, rage, joy. All of it happens within 20 feet of each other, in the dim red glow of the hearth beneath the low turf roof. And yet, there is intimacy, the kind born not of choice but of necessity. You learn the sound of your sister's breathing, the way your father shifts in his sleep, the smell of your mother's hair. You learn patience, silence, coexistence. At night, the fire is banked. The coals are buried in ash to slow their burn, to stretch the fuel through the long, dark hours. The family retreats to the sleeping platforms, piling under furs and woolen blankets. Bodies press close. Heat is shared. Outside, the wind howls. The temperature drops to 40 below. Snow piles against the entrance, sometimes covering it entirely. The family does not care. They are warm, 60 degrees. Always. The children fall asleep listening to the muffled roar of the storm. It sounds distant, unreal, like a memory of a place they no longer live, because they do not live on the surface anymore. They live beneath it, in the earth, in the dark, in the warmth. And in the morning, they will wake, and the fire will still be glowing, and the animals will still be breathing, and the temperature will still be 60 degrees, year after year, generation after generation. Survival, passed down like a language, like a song, like breath itself. There is a place 6 feet below the surface where the earth stops listening to the sky. Above that line, the seasons rule. The frost reaches down in winter, cracking soil, freezing roots, turning the top few feet of ground into stone. In summer, the sun bakes the surface, drying it to dust, heating it until it burns the soles of bare feet. But below the frost line, the earth remembers only itself. This is the secret the Vikings understood with their bodies, with their frozen hands and chilblained feet, with the corpses of children who did not survive surface winters. They understood that the earth is not cold, not at depth. The earth is warm, not hot, not burning, but constant, stable, alive with the slow, patient heat of the planet's core. The temperature 6 feet down, in Scandinavia and Iceland and Greenland, is always between 55 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Always. Summer or winter. Storm or calm. It does not fluctuate. It does not respond to weather. It exists in its own time, its own logic. This is geothermal gradient. The deeper you go, the warmer it gets, about 1 degree Fahrenheit for every 70 feet of depth in temperate regions. At 6 feet, you are not deep enough to feel the furnace of the Earth's core, but you are deep enough to escape the tyranny of the atmosphere. Deep enough that the ground's thermal mass, the slow-moving reservoir of stored heat, dominates. The Viking longhouse is not heated by fire alone. It is heated by the earth itself. The walls, sunk into the hillside, are in direct contact with soil that never freezes. That soil conducts heat inward, slowly, imperceptibly, through the stone and clay layers. It is not dramatic. It is not even noticeable. But it is constant. The earth does not sleep. It does not rest. It radiates, steadily, endlessly, the accumulated warmth of the sun from 1,000 summers past. The turf roof, 3 feet thick, creates a massive insulating layer. It prevents the interior heat from escaping into the frozen air above, but it also prevents the cold from penetrating downward. The sod and soil and layered grass act as a thermal buffer. Heat moves through it slowly, very slowly. So slowly that by the time warmth from the interior fire reaches the outer surface of the roof, it is already being replaced by warmth from the earth below. The result is equilibrium. The fire adds heat. The walls and floor absorb it. The roof traps it. The thermal mass, the stone, the clay, the earth itself stores it and releases it gradually over hours, over days. The temperature inside does not spike when the fire is roaring. It does not crash when the fire dies. It drifts upward gently, downward gently, and settles always in the same narrow range. 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. This is passive climate control. No thermostats, no sensors, no fuel beyond a small daily fire. Just stone, soil, and the physics of heat transfer. The Vikings did not invent this. They inherited it from ancestors who survived the last ice age, who lived in caves and learned that the deeper you go, the safer you are. From cultures that predated writing, predated metallurgy, predated everything except the need to stay alive through winter. But the Vikings perfected it. They engineered it. They turned survival into architecture. The livestock, kept inside, contribute their own warmth. A cow's body temperature is 101 degrees. It radiates heat constantly. 5 cows in a partitioned section can raise the ambient temperature by 8 to 10 degrees without any fire at all. Their breath adds humidity, which makes the air feel warmer. Their manure, composting slowly beneath layers of straw, generates additional heat through microbial breakdown. Nothing is wasted. Every source of warmth, no matter how small, is captured and used. In summer, the system reverses. The sun heats the surface, but the thick turf roof resists. It takes hours for that heat to penetrate even an inch. By the time it begins to reach the interior, the sun has set, and the surface is cooling again. Meanwhile, the earth below, still holding the cold of winter in its deeper layers, draws warmth away from the floor. The interior temperature drifts downward gently and settles, again, in the same range, 55 to 60 degrees. This is not comfort by modern standards. It is not room temperature. It is not warm enough for bare skin and short sleeves. The Vikings still wore wool indoors. They still slept under furs. But it is warm enough to survive. Warm enough that water does not freeze. Warm enough that bodies do not shut down. Warm enough that children wake in the morning instead of dying in the night. And that is everything. Modern architects, rediscovering these principles in the 21st century, call it earth-sheltered housing. They speak of our values in thermal bridging and passive solar gain. They design underground homes with computer models and climate simulations. The Vikings had none of this. They had shovels. They had stone. They had the corpses of the ones who tried to live above ground. And they learned. They learned that the earth does not betray you. That if you dig deep enough, if you build with enough mass, if you respect the slow, patient physics of heat and stone, the earth will keep you alive. Not through mercy, not through kindness, but through equilibrium. The warmth that never dies is not a fire. It is the planet itself, breathing slowly beneath your feet. The Vikings simply learned to listen. There are still homes like this, standing, occupied, lived in. In Iceland, in the Faroe Islands, in the remote valleys of Norway and Greenland, you can find them. Low, grass-covered mounds rising from hillsides, smoke drifting lazily from stone chimneys, doors barely visible against the slope. Some have been inhabited continuously for 800 years. Generations born and dying in the same buried hall, beneath the same turf roof, beside the same stone hearth. The tourists walk past them without noticing. They look like hills, like earth, like nothing at all. But inside, the temperature is 60 degrees. Always. This is not nostalgia. This is not romanticism. This is proven, empirical, replicable engineering. The kind that does not require power grids, fossil fuels, or global supply chains. The kind that worked 1,000 years ago and works today. the kind that will work 1,000 years from now when everything else has failed. Modernity taught us to build upward, to conquer the sky, to create towers of glass and steel that require endless energy to heat in winter and cool in summer. We invented air conditioning and called it progress. We built homes that bleed warmth into the frozen night and call it acceptable loss. But the Vikings knew something we forgot, that the earth is not the enemy, that the ground beneath your feet is not dead weight to be covered and ignored, that if you dig into it, if you build with it, if you let it hold you, it will keep you alive. Not through complexity, through simplicity, not through domination, through cooperation. The Viking longhouse is not a monument. It is a lesson, a reminder that survival does not require mastery over nature. It requires humility before it. It requires observation, patience, the willingness to live not above the land, but within it. We look at these structures now and call them primitive. We see the low ceilings, the smoky interiors, the lack of windows, and we imagine suffering. But the Vikings were not suffering. They were surviving, thriving even, raising families, telling stories, weaving cloth, carving tools, living full, fierce, human lives in spaces that refused to let the cold win. And they did it without technology, without thermostats, without insulation as we define it. They did it with stone and soil and the slow, patient understanding that the earth is a battery, a blanket, a mother that will hold you if you let her. There is a quiet arrogance in modernity, the belief that we have surpassed the past, that we know better, that our solutions are superior because they are new. But stand in a Viking longhouse in the dead of January when the wind outside is howling and the temperature has dropped to 40 below, and feel the stillness, the warmth, the absolute, undeniable proof that they knew something we have spent 1,000 years forgetting. They knew how to be warm without burning the world. They knew how to shelter without conquering. They knew how to survive by digging down instead of building up. And that knowledge is still there, buried, waiting, ready to teach us again if we are willing to kneel in the dirt and listen. The Vikings did not defeat the cold. They negotiated with it. They found the place where the earth's warmth and the sky's cold meet, and they built their lives in that narrow, perfect margin. 60 degrees, year-round, forever. The warmth that never dies is not a fire you feed. It is the ground beneath your feet. And it has been waiting all along for you to come home.